The last time I saw Eleanor de Vere, she was sitting in a windowless room. Her manicured nails tapped on a cheap laminate table. She had traded her custom-made gowns for a standard-issue jumpsuit. Her smile was gone. Her lawyers did all the talking. But that moment came much later. The story, my story, began 6 months earlier, on the day of my daughter's wedding. The house was quiet that afternoon. Sunlight cut through the blinds in my bedroom, striping the old hardwood floor. I picked up my watch from the dresser. The leather strap was worn smooth, cracked with age. I fastened the buckle, a simple, familiar motion. My grandfather gave it to me when I started my first business. A quiet reminder of time and substance. My suit was my best, a dark navy wool I'd had for years. It was clean and pressed. It wasn't Armani. I reached for the small, wooden frame on my dresser. In the photo, a 7-year-old Chloe grinned at me, a proud gap where her front tooth used to be. A wave of pure, uncomplicated pride washed over me. This was the day. The most important day. I placed the photo back, my movements slow and deliberate. I was ready. The De Vere estate was an exercise in overwhelming force. Marble and glass rose from acres of impossibly green lawn. I found Chloe in a small sitting room, a frantic island of calm in the hurricane of preparation. I handed her a small, clumsily wrapped box. Inside was the watch I had just been wearing. "Your grandfather gave this to me," I said, my voice low. "He said it would remind me that time is the only thing we truly own. I want you to have it." I didn't know it then, but she would look at that watch every hour during the depositions, a silent link to a truth she couldn't yet see. She threw her arms around my neck, her grip tight. A perfect moment. The last one we would have that day. After the ceremony, I moved through the reception. It was a sea of unfamiliar faces and expensive perfume. Men in tailored tuxedos discussed portfolios and yachts. Women with surgically perfect smiles spoke of summers the first could never afford. I nodded. I smiled. I began looking for the seating chart, expecting to see my name with the family. At the head table. I found the chart near the ballroom entrance, a towering piece of calligraphed art. My finger traced the elegant script. The head table, Julian and Chloe, Eleanor and Richard de Vere. The family tables were next. My name wasn't there. I scanned lower. And then, near the very bottom, I saw it. Mr. Jack Harding. Table 19. I walked across the vast expanse of silk and crystal. Table 19 was tucked into a dim corner, pushed up against the swinging double doors of the kitchen. A fine linen tablecloth was draped over it. And sitting precisely in the center was a small, brutal nameplate. The calligraphy was perfect. Dad by obligation. The sound of the party receded to a dull, distant roar. The blood drained from my face. I could feel the heat leave my skin. Across the room, Chloe was laughing, her head thrown back, a picture of pure joy. She hadn't seen. She would never see. I swallowed the raw, metallic taste of humiliation, straightened my tie, and sat down. I chose to protect her happiness. It was the only choice I had. A few minutes later, Eleanor de Vere glided toward my table. A perfectly chilled flute of champagne was in her hand. Her approach was not an accident. It was a performance. "Jack! There you are," she said, her voice carrying to the nearby tables. "I was looking all over for you. I do hope you're comfortable. We had to make some last-minute adjustments, and things got so terribly complicated." She leaned in, her perfume cloying. "But honestly," she whispered, "you have the best seat in the house. You're right next to the kitchen, so you'll get your food before anyone else. A little silver lining, don't you think? I would replay that exact smile in my mind 1,000 times. I would see it on the grainy security footage from her bank in the Caymans." I looked up at her. My face was a mask of perfect neutrality. I refused to give her the satisfaction. "Chloe looks happy, Eleanor," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "That's all that matters." Her own smile tightened for a fraction of a second. She didn't understand my defiance because she couldn't comprehend a world where her power didn't work. She patted my shoulder, a gesture of dismissal, and walked away. During the toasts, I slipped out of the ballroom. I walked down a quiet, carpeted hallway until I found a large pane of glass overlooking the dark gardens. I saw my reflection. For the first time, the mask I was wearing cracked. I saw the deep, profound hurt in my own eyes. The humiliation. The first flicker of a cold, hard anger. This was how they saw me. An obligation. A problem to be managed and hidden in a corner. I took one deep, shuddering breath. My shoulders slumped. Then I pulled them back, adjusted my jacket, and the mask slid back into place. I walked back toward the light. It was time for the father-daughter dance. Chloe ran to my table, her face radiant. "Dad! Come on!" She laughed, pulling me by the hand. The band started playing. It was an old folk song I used to sing to her as a lullaby. I took her in my arms, and for her, the world was perfect. I smiled, letting my eyes crinkle at the corners just so. But I was dancing with the ghost of that nameplate between us. I held the center of my universe, the daughter I had just been publicly disowned for. Her new family had branded me. The chasm between her joy and my reality was absolute. She never knew. Not then. By the time she found out, the De Vere empire was already turning to dust. The wedding ended. I drove my Ford sedan away from the glittering estate and back toward my quiet neighborhood. I pulled into my driveway and killed the engine. I did not get out. I sat in the profound, heavy silence of the car. The streetlights cast long shadows. The hurt was still there, a raw wound. But it was beginning to change. Curdling into something colder. Something more precise. I replayed Eleanor's words. Things got so terribly complicated. I saw the perfect calligraphy on the nameplate. It was too perfect. Too deliberate. My mind, the mind of a forensic accountant, the mind trained to see patterns where others see chaos, began to work. A single, clear thought cut through the emotional fog. My eyes focused on the darkness ahead. The hurt was gone. In its place, a glimmer of steel. That wasn't cruelty. That was a strategy. For 3 days, the house was silent. In the early morning, I'd sit at my kitchen table and watch the coffee drip, black and bitter, into the pot. The morning paper lay folded and unread. My attention was fixed on the small, elegant place card I'd taken from the wedding. Dad by obligation. I ran my thumb over the embossed letters. The humiliation hadn't faded. It had sharpened. It was a splinter of ice working its way deeper. This wasn't a careless insult. It was a calculated message, delivered with calligraphic precision. The hurt was burning away, leaving something cold and hard in its place. My home office is a simple room. A desk, a computer, shelves of financial records. I looked up a number and dialed. My cousin Brenda answered on the second ring, her voice eager for gossip. We made small talk. The weather. Her kids. Then I guided the conversation to the wedding. A beautiful ceremony, I said. You know, I was sat near Julian's uncle, Richard. Interesting fellow. He mentioned something about a financial firewall for the family. Sounded technical. You have any idea what he was talking about? Brenda, flattered, took the bait. She would later repeat this conversation to a federal investigator, insisting I had sounded perfectly casual. She told me Richard was always complaining about Eleanor's spending, and that the family had ring-fenced their last real assets to protect them from creditors. It was a small thing. A crack. It was all I needed to get started. That night, I let myself into my firm. The building was dark and quiet. I didn't turn on the overheads, just the small lamp on my desk. An island of light in a sea of shadows. This was my world. This was where I had the advantage. I didn't need sophisticated software. I needed public records. Property deeds for De Vere Holdings. Business registrations. I printed the documents, the papers whispering out of the machine. I laid them out, piece by piece. With a red pen, I started drawing lines, connecting ghost companies to family members, noting the dates they were created. The De Vere facade of old money began to look like a desperate, tangled web. The next day I met Sal at a Greasy Spoon diner on the east side. The vinyl on the booth was cracked and the coffee was watery. Sal was a semi-retired financial journalist, a cynical old dog who trusted no one. Except me. De Veres? He grunted, not looking up from his coffee. They've been running on fumes for a generation, Jack. All image. He took a noisy sip. They sold off their last piece of valuable real estate in the city 2 years ago. Did it quiet. He pulled a pen from his pocket and scribbled a name on a cheap paper napkin. He slid it across the table. Start there. That napkin, with its grease stain and scribbled name, would never be seen in a courtroom, but it was the key that unlocked everything. I knew I had to see them. I had to confirm what I was beginning to suspect. I went to a grocery store I would never normally enter. It was a sterile, minimalist place where vegetables were artfully arranged and a loaf of bread cost $12. I pushed a nearly empty cart down the pristine aisles. And then I saw them. Julian and Eleanor, laughing as they filled their cart with imported cheese, expensive wine, organic everything. They were performing their life of effortless wealth. I turned down their aisle. A chance encounter. Jack! Fancy seeing you here, Julian said, his smile instant and charming. Eleanor looked from my simple basket, milk, bread, back to my face. Her disdain was a physical force. John, she said, I trust you're settling back into your routine? The air was thick with unspoken meaning. They were reinforcing the message from the wedding. You are not one of us. I played my part. Just picking up a few things, I said, offering a simple, unassuming smile. You two look well. Married life suits you, Julian. I was exactly who they thought I was. The harmless, obligated father. As they walked away, confident in their superiority, my smile faded. I wasn't there to shop. I was there to witness their arrogance. It was their fatal flaw. That afternoon, a deep restlessness took hold. I went into the garage, the air thick with the smell of dust and old gasoline. I opened a storage box. My hands brushed against something small and stiff. It was a child's baseball glove, the leather worn and cracked. In my mind, I saw a flash of a sun-drenched park. A tiny Chloe, laughing as she tried to catch a ball, the glove comically large on her small hand. I worked my own hand into the stiff leather. The investigation wasn't about the nameplate anymore. It wasn't about my pride. It was about protecting that little girl. Back in my office that night, the wall behind my desk was a constellation of paper and red string. A map of their lives. Following Sal's tip, I had dug into the holding company on the napkin. I cross-referenced shipping manifests and asset declarations. Then I found it. 3 luxury yachts, registered to 3 different shell companies, all sold in quiet, private sales over the last 6 months. The final sale was 3 weeks before the wedding. I found a society blog from the year before. A photo of Chloe and Julian on the deck of one of those yachts. The caption read, "The happy couple aboard the De Vere family yacht, the Eleanor." I put the bill of sale next to the picture on my screen. The truth was stark. They were liquidating everything while projecting an image of endless wealth. It was the first concrete lie. I leaned back in my chair. There was no triumph. Only the grim, cold certainty that I was on the right path. I was sitting in my car across the street from their mansion as dusk settled, watching the lights flicker on. I had the shape of it now. The debt, the sold assets, the desperate charade. My phone buzzed. A text from Chloe. It was a picture of her and Julian on a terrace, clinking champagne glasses, the ocean behind them. She was beaming. "Having an amazing honeymoon," the text read. "See you when we get back. We have so many plans to talk about. Julian wants to start renovating the East Wing as soon as we're home. Love you." I looked at the glowing screen, at my daughter's innocent, happy face. Then I looked at the dark, silent house. I knew there was no money for champagne. I knew there was no money for renovations. The plans were a lie to get to her trust fund. I turned the key. The roar of the engine sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet street. The wounded father was gone. A protector was driving away. And he had a mission. Every morning, I walked to the end of the driveway and retrieved the mail. It was a small ritual of normalcy in the quiet that had descended on the house. I'd sort through the bills and the junk, my eyes scanning for a postcard, for Chloe's familiar handwriting. For a week, there was nothing. I knew she was on her honeymoon, that she was happy. But the small, expected connection was gone. I'd go back inside, leaving the stack of envelopes on the hall table. The silence of the house always felt heavier after that. I drove to a part of town I rarely visited, to a small, cluttered electronics shop that smelled of solder and ozone. Anya was behind the counter, a soldering iron in her hand. I had helped her with an IRS audit a few years back. She owed me. I didn't ask her to hack anyone. I framed it as a security problem. My daughter married into a family with some complicated business partners, I said, leaning on the counter. I'm worried she's exposed. Is there a way to check for vulnerabilities in their company's servers? Just to make sure she's safe. Anya was smart. She knew there was more to it, but she didn't ask. Years later, on a witness stand, she would state that my request was solely about a corporate security audit. Her testimony would be unshakable because it was the literal truth. A few days later, she called me back to the shop. Their security is a joke, she said, pointing at a screen of code. Old. Sloppy. But that's not the interesting part. She explained that Julian's corporate email was set to automatically forward every message to a personal, generic account. It's careless, she said. Stupid even. She wrote the address on a slip of paper and pushed it across the counter. I can't go further than this. But a person could run a password recovery on an address like that. If they knew the answers to his security questions. Questions like the name of his first pet, or the street he grew up on. Details I had overheard guests laughing about at the wedding. I didn't go to my office. I didn't use my home computer. I went to the downtown public library and sat at a computer terminal between a student researching a paper and an old man reading the news. The space was anonymous, untraceable. I navigated to the email login screen and typed in the address Anya had given me. I clicked the link that read, "Forgot password." The security questions appeared. What was the name of your first pet? Rex. What street did you grow up on? Elmcroft. A new password screen loaded. I took a breath. And logged in. My phone rang that evening. It was Chloe, back from her honeymoon. Her voice was bright, but there was a new, carefully rehearsed quality to it. Dad! We're back! It was amazing. She talked about the sand and the sun, then her tone shifted. Listen, something a little awkward came up, she said. Julian's mother mentioned you were talking to some of their partners, asking questions. A pause. She thinks it's so wonderful how protective you are, but she's worried they might get the wrong impression. That you don't trust Julian. It was a perfect piece of manipulation. A poisoned compliment. It was Eleanor's strategy, spoken in Chloe's voice. Just making conversation, I said, my own voice perfectly even. Glad you had a good time, honey. I hung up. The first shot had been fired. They were using my daughter as the weapon. I went to the filing cabinet in my office. I pulled out a thick folder labeled CHLOE. It didn't contain stock certificates or bank statements. I took out a third-grade report card, the paper soft and brittle with age. I unfolded it. The teacher's comment was written in neat cursive. Chloe has a strong sense of fairness and isn't afraid to stand up for others. I remembered that little girl. Fierce. Unflinching. She was the one I was fighting for. Back at the library, the screen was filled with a long list of Julian's forwarded emails. I started to read. Hope died. and a cold, profound rage took its place. The words on the screen became a series of blows. Subject: the wedding. An email from Eleanor. The nameplate was a masterstroke. She spent the entire night defending us to her friends. He's already isolated. Subject: the father. From Julian. He's asking questions. Nothing to worry about. He's a glorified bookkeeper playing detective. Let him. It will only make him look more controlling when we tell Chloe. Then, the final email. The blueprint. Subject: the next step. Eleanor's words filled the screen. Once the trust transfers, we begin. We suggest a new financial advisor, ours. We frame his advice as old-fashioned, risky. We paint him as a jealous father who can't let go. Within a year, he'll be nothing more than a sad story she tells about her overbearing, working-class dad. The low hum of the library computer was the only sound in my world. My knuckles were white where I gripped the edge of the cheap desk. I would see these emails again, projected onto a large screen in a federal courtroom. I would watch the jury read every single word. This wasn't just about money. It was a character assassination. A plan to methodically, surgically erase me from my daughter's life. I stared at the screen, motionless. Then I saw it. A new email at the top of the list, received just an hour ago. From Julian to Eleanor. The subject line was simple. She's on board. The preview text was visible. Just got off the phone with her. She bought the story about her father's concerns completely. Phase 2 can begin as soon as. I clicked it open. As the full message loaded, a small chat window popped up on the side of the screen. It was Julian. He was online. Mom, you there? I froze. My hands hovered over the keyboard. He thought I was his mother. The cursor blinked in the reply box. A straight line to the enemy. A trap. And an opportunity. My finger trembled as it moved toward the keyboard. In the dark before dawn, I stood in my kitchen. The only light was a small lamp over the counter. I poured coffee beans into a manual grinder. I turned the crank, a steady, rhythmic rasping that cut through the silence of the house. It was a sound of control. Of gears beginning to turn. I wasn't waking up. I was preparing. The cold fury I'd felt in the library had settled. It was now a tool, something to be honed and aimed. I measured the grounds. I poured the hot water with a steady hand. Every movement was precise. Deliberate. My office wall was a map of their crumbling finances. I was no longer looking at the big picture of their debt. I was hunting for a specific weakness. I ignored the large, faceless banks. I was looking for a predator. I found him. A private, high-interest loan from a man named Marcus Thorne. His reputation was for ruthless, swift asset seizure. I pulled up the loan agreement. The collateral wasn't property. It wasn't stock. It was a small collection of Dutch masters' paintings Eleanor loved to boast about in magazines. The nerve. I had found the nerve. I drove to a part of town I never visit. I walked into a rundown convenience store that smelled of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. I paid cash for a cheap burner phone. In the car, I powered it on. The small screen glowed with an unfamiliar logo. I composed a text message to Marcus Thorne. It was not a tip. It was a scalpel. Read De Vere Loan #AX473. The collateral, art collection, is currently being appraised for private sale to a foreign buyer. They are preparing to move the assets out of the country. Check your clause on unauthorized collateral transfer. Thorne would later testify that the anonymous text was the most professional and alarming tip he'd ever received. He acted on it within the hour. I knew from a society blog that Eleanor held court every Tuesday at an exclusive restaurant with a sunny patio. I sat in a coffee shop across the street with a newspaper and a black coffee. I waited. She arrived, a queen greeting her subjects. She laughed, she ordered, she performed. Then I saw her answer her phone. Her posture, so perfect and relaxed, went rigid. The charming smile dissolved into a mask of pure panic. Her hands gestured, sharp and angry. She stood abruptly, leaving her friends with their mouths open. I watched her hurry away. I took a calm sip of my coffee. I left a $5 bill on the table and walked out. The art storage facility was a silent, sterile place, cold as a tomb. I knew the loan terms would require an immediate appraisal. I knew Julian would have to be there. I arranged to consult with another client at the same facility, at the same time. I was in the climate-controlled viewing room when he walked in, flanked by a stern-faced appraiser. He was sweating in the cold. I was 30 feet away, quietly examining a sculpture, seemingly lost in my work. He kept glancing at me, his agitation growing. "Harding? What are you doing here?" he finally asked, his voice tight with strain. I looked up, feigning mild surprise. "Julian. Just doing my job. You." I gave him a simple, disarming smile. "Everything okay? You look a little stressed." I did nothing else. I just stood there, a calm presence in his storm. To him, I was just a bookkeeper. A gnat. He had no idea I was the architect of his misery. Later that afternoon, I was in the park, tossing a baseball with my neighbor's teenage son. The rhythmic thwack of the ball hitting leather was a grounding sound. The kid talked about school, about a girl, about some video game. I listened. I threw the ball back. For a few minutes, I wasn't a hunter. I was just a man in a park on a sunny afternoon. Driving home, the burner phone buzzed on the passenger seat. An unknown number. I answered. I said nothing. The voice on the other end was a frantic, screaming torrent of threats and accusations. It was Julian. He had unraveled completely. I listened, my face impassive. I let him scream until he ran out of breath. Then, without a word, I ended the call. The light turned green. I pulled away from the curb. And for the first time, a cold, hard smile of pure satisfaction spread across my face. I had broken their composure. They were bleeding. And they had no idea who held the knife. The satisfaction was short-lived. That night, I was in my office, planning the next step. My personal phone rang. It was Chloe. I answered, the warmth returning to my voice. "Hi, honey." Her voice was tight. Strained. She had been crying. "Dad? I need to talk to you." Julian just told me everything. My blood ran cold. "Everything about what?" "About you," she said, her voice thick with accusation. "About how you've been investigating him. How you're trying to sabotage his family's business. How you just tried to get his mother's paintings seized. He thinks you're trying to destroy our marriage because you don't think he's good enough for me." There was a silence. Then the final blow. "I can't believe you, Dad. I can't believe you'd lie to me. I need some space." The line went dead. I stared at the silent phone. They had taken my attack and twisted it. They had used it as proof of the exact lie they had planned to tell. My small victory was now the weapon they were using to sever me from my daughter. It was ashes in my mouth. I had been outmaneuvered. I was completely and utterly alone. I didn't sleep. Morning came, a sunbeam cutting across the tangled sheets of my unmade bed. My clothes from yesterday were slung over a chair. A half-empty glass of water sat on the nightstand. My entire life had been built on meticulous order. Now my bedroom looked like the inside of my head. A wreck. I stood at the window and stared at the quiet street. I picked up my phone, saw Chloe's smiling face on the contact screen, and put it back down. The silence in the house was a physical weight. At the kitchen table, I typed a text. "Chloe, we need to talk. Please. I can explain." I deleted it. How could I explain? I typed again. "I love you. That's all that matters." I hit send. I watched the screen. The word, delivered, appeared beneath the message. And then, nothing. The silence from her phone was louder than any screaming match. Later, I was just driving. I had no destination. On impulse, I pulled over to the side of the road and called her. It rang once. Twice. Then a cold, robotic voice interrupted. The number you have dialed is not accepting calls at this time. Blocked. She had blocked my number. The finality of it was a punch to the gut. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel, the engine humming softly, a man completely severed from his own life. Desperation is a quiet, ugly thing. I drove to their neighborhood. I parked down the street, hidden by a row of manicured hedges, just hoping for a glimpse. A black Mercedes pulled up to the gates. Julian got out of the driver's side. He opened the passenger door, and Chloe emerged, dressed in a crisp white dress. He put his arm around her. He kissed her forehead and whispered something that made her smile. A real smile. They looked perfect. They looked happy. I was the villain watching from the shadows. I had become the sad story they planned for me to be. I drove away before they could see me. The night before, standing in my living room, the phone had felt cold against my ear. Her voice trembled with what I could only hear as betrayal. Julian just told me everything. Everything about what? I had asked, my own voice a hollow whisper. About you. About how you've been investigating him. How you hired people, how you made anonymous calls. Dad, he showed me proof. He said you were trying to get his mother's paintings taken away. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. It was all true. Every accusation was a fact. Without the context of their conspiracy, I was a monster. I had no defense. He loves me, she cried, her voice breaking over the phone. His family has been nothing but kind to me. And you've been trying to destroy them behind my back. He said this would happen. He said you couldn't stand to see me happy with someone else. I didn't want to believe him. Chloe, honey, listen to me. I pleaded, my own composure gone. It's not what you think. They are not who you think they are. No, Dad. I don't want to listen, she sobbed. For the first time in my life, I have this incredible, loving family, and you're trying to ruin it because you can't control me anymore. I can't believe you'd lie to me. I need some space. The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. That night, I walked into my office. The wall was still covered in the architecture of their lies. In a single, blind movement of pure rage, I swept my arm across it. Papers and strings and photographs went flying. The entire investigation rained down onto the floor. In the chaos, the small framed picture from my dresser, the one of me and a 7-year-old, gap-toothed Chloe, crashed to the ground. I picked it up. The glass was cracked. A sharp, clean line ran right between our two smiling faces. I traced the crack with my thumb. I hadn't saved her. I had broken us. I was still sitting on the floor amidst the wreckage when my lawyer called. His voice was cheerful. Jack? Just wanted to let you know the transfer is complete. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Chloe Harding de Vere is the sole signatory on the trust. It's all hers now. It was meant to be the culmination of my life's work. Instead, it was a death sentence. The money I built to protect her was now in their hands. They had won. They had the money. They had my daughter. I hung up the phone. It was over. I had lost. I sat there for hours, surrounded by the debris of my failure, holding the broken frame. I replayed her words from the phone call. I pictured her face at the gate, smiling at the man who was systematically destroying me. The pain was a physical thing. But through the fog, a part of my mind that never sleeps, the forensic part, snagged on a single detail. A loose thread in the fabric of my despair. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. One phrase echoed. He thinks you're trying to destroy our marriage because you don't think he's good enough for me. It was a strange, formal sentence. It wasn't Chloe. It wasn't the way she talked. It sounded rehearsed. It sounded like a line written by Eleanor. I looked down at the photo in my hands, at that 7-year-old girl. I remembered her third-grade report card. A strong sense of fairness. The despair didn't vanish. but a question flickered in the dark. A wild, impossible question. It wasn't hope. Not yet. It was something colder. The broken man on the floor looked down at the photo of his daughter, and the corner of my mouth twitched. It was not a smile. It was the ghost of one. I whispered one word to the empty, silent room. Wait. The floor of my office was a sea of paper. The wreckage of my failed investigation. I started picking up the documents, one by one. My hands were steady. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. The wild question I'd asked myself in the dark had taken root. I smoothed out a crumpled spreadsheet detailing a De Vere loan. I looked at the broken photo frame on my desk, the crack running between me and my daughter. Then I looked at the wall. I started pinning the pages back up. Not in the same way. The configuration was different now. It was no longer a web of connections to trace a crime. It was a blueprint. A wiring diagram of their vulnerabilities. I was no longer a detective. I was an architect. I sat at my desk, took a deep breath, and dialed Eleanor de Vere's number. I put on the mask of the defeated man. My voice was humble, soft with apology. Eleanor. It's Jack. I know I've overstepped. My only excuse is that I love my daughter. I want to make things right. I could feel her smug satisfaction through the phone. This was the surrender she had expected. It's their 1-month anniversary soon, I continued. I'd like to host a small party for them. A gesture of goodwill. A father's blessing, if you will. She graciously accepted. She had no idea she had just personally escorted her entire family into an ambush. For the next week I worked. Fueled by black coffee and a cold, burning intensity, I sat at my desk and I built my weapon. I took the facts of their ruin and I gave them new names. Outstanding liabilities became opportunities for strategic restructuring. Insolvent shell corporations were reframed as legacy assets requiring modernized oversight. Their massive personal debt was meticulously detailed as a history of aggressive capital investment. I wasn't cooking the books. I was serving them raw, on a silver platter, under the guise of a perfectly sound financial plan. A plan I called a father's blessing. I knew their primary investor was a man named Howard Sterling, an old money shark who valued the appearance of stability above all else. I went to a steakhouse downtown at lunchtime, a place that smelled of leather and greed. As expected, Sterling was holding court at his usual table. I walked past, then stopped, feigning surprise. I played the part of the proud, simple father-in-law. I invited him to the surprise party. It's just a small family affair, I said, knowing his curiosity would be too strong to resist. But Julian is so keen to start taking a more active role in the family business, I thought we should celebrate the next chapter. The hook was baited. The day before the party, I picked up the finished portfolio from a bespoke printer downtown. It was a heavy, substantial volume, bound in dark blue leather. The title was embossed in gold. A Father's Blessing. As I was paying, Eleanor de Vere walked in. A true coincidence. She was picking up invitations. She saw me and gave me a look of pitying condescension. John. How nice to see you out and about. Her eyes fell on the elegant book in my hands. Oh, how lovely. A photo album for the kids? I gave her my simple, unassuming smile. Something like that, I said. Just a little gift. To show my support. She saw a broken man. A working-class father trying to buy his way back into favor. She had no idea she was admiring the craftsmanship of an executioner's axe. That's sweet, John, she said, patting my arm. I'm sure Chloe will appreciate the gesture. That night, I did not review my plan. I went to my workshop in the garage. I sat at the workbench with the broken photo frame. With a small kit, I began to repair it. I filled the sharp cracks in the glass with a lacquer of shimmering gold. The Japanese call it kintsugi. It doesn't hide the break. It makes it beautiful. It makes it part of the story. My hands were steady. I was not just fixing a frame. I was praying that what was broken could be made whole again. The private dining room was filled with the low hum of money. The de Vera's most important investors were all there. Chloe looked beautiful, but tense. I tapped a water glass with a spoon. The room fell silent. I gave a short toast. I spoke of fatherhood, of love, of the future. I've spent my life building things, I said, my eyes on Chloe. But a father's greatest project is his child's happiness. I turned to Julian. And I have the utmost confidence in you, Julian, to lead your family's businesses into a new era of prosperity. I presented the heavy, leather-bound book to them. A father's blessing. Eleanor and Julian beamed. A public surrender. A validation of their victory. They opened it to the first page. The smiles faltered. I watched the color drain from Julian's face. Eleanor's jaw tightened. They turned the page. And another. They were looking at their own financial autopsy. Their debts, their insolvent companies, their desperate liquidation of assets, all laid bare. All meticulously framed as a bold growth strategy that would require Julian to personally assume control and legal responsibility for every rotten piece of their empire. And it would all be overseen by a new board of directors, as suggested by the plan. The gift was a prison. To refuse it was to admit to their investors that they were ruined. To accept it was to hand me the keys. Julian held the book as if it were a venomous snake. Howard Sterling clapped him on the back. Well, son, looks like you've got your work cut out for you. A bold strategy. Eleanor recovered first. She snapped the book shut. Her socialite mask was cracking. She glided toward me, her movements stiff with rage. The noise of the party seemed to fade to a dull roar. Her smile was a terrifying slash of red lipstick. She leaned in close, her voice a low, venomous hiss meant only for me. You clever, low-class little man, she spit, her eyes burning with a hatred that was pure and clean. You think you've won? I didn't move. I held her gaze, my face a perfect, unreadable mask. Over her shoulder, I saw Chloe, watching us. Her face was a canvas of confusion and a dawning, terrible concern. The trap was sprung. The war had begun. The air in the room was thick and silent. All the meaningless chatter of the party had vanished. It was just Eleanor and me, locked in a stare. Her face was a mask of pure fury. Mine was a mask of stone. Behind her, a blur of shocked faces. Julian stood frozen, clutching the leather-bound book as if it were a bomb. Then I saw Chloe. She was watching, but not me. Her gaze was fixed on Eleanor with a kind of intense, focused calm. She was waiting for something. Eleanor, stripped of her social graces, finally broke. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? She snarled, her voice a low, vicious thing. You are a grubby little man who plays with numbers. We will crush you. We will ruin you. And we will make sure your precious daughter sees you for the pathetic, interfering nobody you are. Before I could form a reply, a voice cut through the tension. It was quiet, but it owned the room. That's enough, Eleanor. Chloe stepped forward. All eyes snapped to her. Julian, panicked, started toward her. Chloe, darling, your father is... She held up a hand, a small, sharp gesture that silenced him without a glance. She walked to the table where Julian had dropped the portfolio. She placed her hand on the dark blue leather. Then she looked at me. For the first time in weeks, I saw my daughter. Clear-eyed. Strong. Thank you, Dad, she said, her voice steady. This is exactly the confirmation I was waiting for. Confusion hit me like a physical blow. My own mask of control began to crack. Confirmation? Julian stammered, rushing to her side. Darling, what are you talking about? Your father has lost his mind. Chloe turned to him, and her expression was pure ice. I've had my suspicions for a while, Julian. Ever since you started asking too many questions about the exact wording of my trust, before we were even engaged. She looked past him, to his mother. But the name played at our wedding. Dad, by obligation, That wasn't just cruel. It was a strategy. And it was sloppy. Eleanor scoffed. You're being hysterical. Am I? Chloe replied. She took out her phone. When you think someone is a fool, you get careless. You talk. Especially when you think you've won. She pressed a button. A crystal clear audio recording filled the silent room. First, Julian's voice, smug and self-congratulatory. Hook, line, and sinker. She completely believes he's the villain. Then, Eleanor's triumphant laugh. Of course, she does, darling. She's his daughter. She has his simple, sentimental DNA. By the time we're done, she'll thank us for saving her from him. As their own arrogant words echoed through the room, I wasn't looking at them. I wasn't watching the color drain from their faces or the horror dawn in their eyes. I was looking at my daughter. And I understood. The frantic, tearful phone call. It was a performance. The rehearsed words of accusation. They were a script. Blocking my number wasn't an act of betrayal. It was a strategic necessity to convince them she was completely on their side, to make them feel safe enough to get careless. She was never a victim I needed to save. She was my silent partner. She had been fighting her own war, right alongside me. The need for revenge, the cold anger that had fueled me for months, it all just evaporated. In its place was a wave of awe so profound it left me breathless. The recording ended. The silence was absolute. Chloe turned off her phone. She looked at Julian, at the pathetic, crumbling ruin of the man she had almost married. She gently twisted the diamond ring from her finger. She placed it on top of the leather portfolio. My father's blessing, she said, her voice quiet and final, is that I never have to see you again. The investors, led by Howard Sterling, began to move. They turned their backs on the de Veres, drifting away from the public execution as if from a contagion. Chloe and I walked out of the restaurant and into the cool night air. The city hummed around us. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment, the chaos of the party already a world away. I finally turned to her, my voice thick. You knew, I said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of wonder. A small smile, the first genuine one I had seen in months, touched her lips. I learned from the best, she said. She reached into her purse and pulled out the cheap, elegant nameplate from the wedding. Dad by obligation. She looked from it to me. They got it wrong. With a sharp crack, she snapped the plastic card in two and let the pieces fall into a trash can on the curb. She reached over and took my hand. Come on, Dad. Let's go home. We walked away down the street, hand in hand. The quiet, unassuming man was gone. The mask was gone. I was not looking at the victory I had won. I was looking at my daughter. My greatest project. My equal. Not the dad by obligation. The dad by example.